There was a time when grocery shopping meant choosing between familiar brands, walking through huge supermarkets, and paying whatever the market told you to pay. Big stores, endless aisles, thousands of products, and expensive brands competing for your attention. But then, a different kind of supermarket started changing the rules. Aldi. Aldi didn't become successful by building the biggest stores, or offering the largest selection, or filling its shelves with every brand imaginable. It did almost the opposite. Its stores were smaller. Its product selection was limited. Its shelves looked simpler. Its employees worked differently, and many of the products carried names most shoppers had never heard of. Yet millions of people started choosing Aldi because there was one thing they noticed immediately: the prices. Aldi could sell everyday products for surprisingly little money. But here's the question: how? How can a supermarket sell groceries so cheaply while still operating thousands of stores, paying employees, transporting products, and making a profit? The answer isn't one secret. There isn't a magic supplier, a hidden government deal, or some mysterious trick that makes groceries cost less. Instead, Aldi built an entire business model around one simple idea: spend less wherever the customer doesn't need you to spend. That philosophy affects almost everything: the size of the store, the number of products, the brands on the shelves, the way employees work, the way products are displayed, the way customers use shopping carts, even the way you pay at the checkout. Every small saving adds up, and when those savings are repeated across thousands of stores, they become millions, and eventually, billions. But Aldi's story isn't really about being cheap. It's about being efficient. Because Aldi discovered something that many giant retailers overlooked: you don't need to give customers more if you can give them what they actually want, at a better price. And that simple idea turned a small German grocery business into one of the most powerful discount supermarket chains in the world. But to understand how Aldi built this extraordinary system, we have to go back to post-war Germany, where the story of Aldi began. After the Second World War, Germany was rebuilding. Cities had been damaged. Families were struggling. And for millions of people, every penny mattered. It was during this difficult period that two brothers, Karl and Theo Albrecht, began building something that would eventually change the supermarket industry. Their story started much earlier, with a small grocery store operated by their mother in Essen, Germany. It wasn't glamorous. There were no enormous aisles, no sophisticated advertising campaigns, and certainly no global brand. It was simply a neighborhood grocery store, serving ordinary customers. But the Albrecht brothers noticed something important. People didn't necessarily want luxury. They wanted value. They wanted everyday necessities at prices they could actually afford. So instead of trying to make shopping more complicated, the brothers focused on making their business simpler: lower costs, lower prices, fast inventory turnover, and very little unnecessary spending. That philosophy became the foundation of what would eventually become Aldi. The name itself came from combining Albrecht discount, or simply Aldi. As the business expanded across Germany, the brothers continued experimenting with the discount model. They didn't try to compete with supermarkets by offering more. They competed by offering less for less. Fewer products, smaller stores, simpler operations, lower prices. But then, something happened that would fundamentally change the company. In the 1960s, Karl and Theo Albrecht disagreed over an important business decision. The result? The original Aldi business was split into two separate companies: Aldi Nord and Aldi Sud. The two businesses would operate independently, with different territories and management structures. But they shared the same basic philosophy: keep the operation simple, keep costs low, and pass those savings on to customers. Over the following decades, Aldi began expanding beyond Germany. Country after country, store after store, the discount supermarket model traveled across Europe and eventually into markets like the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. But Aldi didn't suddenly become a global giant by spending billions on advertising. It grew through something much more powerful: consistency. The same basic philosophy, repeated again and again. Aldi didn't need every customer. It needed customers who appreciated one thing above everything else: value. And this created a powerful relationship. The cheaper Aldi became, the more people noticed it. The more people noticed it, the more stores Aldi could open. And the more stores it opened, the more efficiently it could operate. But the most important part of Aldi's strategy was still ahead, because Aldi wasn't simply trying to sell groceries cheaply. It was redesigning the entire supermarket experience, from the products it sold to the way those products reached the shelves. And that leads to one of the biggest secrets behind Aldi's low prices. Aldi doesn't try to sell everything. It deliberately sells less. Most supermarkets have a simple goal: give customers more. More brands, more choices, more sizes, more flavors, more aisles, and more reasons to keep shopping. Walk into a typical supermarket, and you might find 10 different types of cereal, 20 different brands of coffee, dozens of varieties of snacks, and an entire aisle dedicated to products you didn't even know existed. At first, this seems like good business, because more products should mean more sales, right? Aldi looked at the same industry and came to a completely different conclusion. What if more products actually created more problems? Every additional product has a cost. It needs to be transported. It needs to be stored. It needs shelf space. It needs inventory management. It needs employees to handle it. And eventually, someone has to make sure it actually sells. If it doesn't, the supermarket is left with unsold inventory. And unsold inventory can become a very expensive problem. Aldi's solution was radical. Instead of trying to offer everything, offer fewer things, but make those things sell extremely well. This became one of the fundamental principles of the Aldi model. Walk into an Aldi store, and you may notice something immediately. There simply aren't as many choices. Instead of dozens of brands competing for the same product category, you might see only a handful of options. Instead of endless variations, Aldi focuses on a much smaller selection. And that limitation is not a weakness. It's the strategy. Because fewer products create a simpler operation. A simpler operation means fewer suppliers, fewer deliveries, less storage, less shelf space, less inventory complexity, and fewer decisions for employees. But there's another advantage. Aldi can buy more of the products it actually sells. Imagine two supermarkets. Supermarket A sells 20 different brands of pasta. Supermarket B sells only 3. If both supermarkets want to keep their shelves full, Supermarket A has to divide its purchasing between 20 products. Supermarket B can concentrate its buying power on 3. That gives Aldi something extremely valuable: scale. When Aldi knows that millions of customers are going to buy the same product, it can negotiate aggressively with suppliers. And suppliers know something too. Getting their product into Aldi can mean access to a huge customer base. So Aldi doesn't necessarily need thousands of products to create a powerful supermarket. It needs the right products. And this philosophy changes the customer experience. You don't walk into Aldi expecting endless choice. You walk in expecting to find what you need, quickly, at a good price. That makes Aldi shopping feel different. There's less time spent comparing 20 nearly identical products, less time walking through endless aisles, and often, less temptation to fill your cart with things you never planned to buy. But this creates another question. If Aldi doesn't rely heavily on famous brands, what exactly is it selling? The answer is one of the biggest secrets behind its low prices. Private labels. Products that may look ordinary, but are actually at the heart of Aldi's entire business model. And once you understand how private labels work, Aldi's prices begin to make much more sense. Because Aldi isn't simply choosing cheaper products. It's changing who controls the product. Walk into a traditional supermarket, and you might find an entire wall dedicated to one simple product. Take peanut butter. There may be creamy peanut butter, crunchy peanut butter, organic peanut butter, low-fat peanut butter, different sizes, different brands, different prices, and dozens of colorful labels competing for your attention. For shoppers, it can feel like freedom, but for a supermarket, it's complicated. Every single product takes up space. Every product has to be ordered. Every product has to be transported. Every product has to be counted. And every product has to eventually be sold. Aldi took this complicated system and stripped it down. Instead of asking, how many products can we put on our shelves? Aldi asks, how few products can we sell while still giving customers everything they need? That small change in thinking has enormous consequences. Aldi stores typically carry far fewer products than traditional supermarkets. This means the company can concentrate its resources on a smaller number of items. And that creates something retailers desperately want: predictability. When Aldi knows which products sell, it can order them in larger quantities. When it orders larger quantities, suppliers can produce more efficiently. When production becomes more efficient, costs can fall. And when costs fall, Aldi has room to lower prices. It's a cycle. Fewer products, higher volume, lower complexity, lower costs. But there is another hidden advantage. Aldi doesn't need enormous stores. If you have thousands of different products, you need thousands of shelves to display them. You need larger buildings, more lighting, more refrigeration, more employees, and more maintenance. But when your product selection is limited, you can operate inside a much smaller space. That means Aldi can focus on locations where a giant supermarket might struggle to justify the cost of a huge building. And this is where Aldi's strategy becomes especially clever. The company isn't simply selling fewer products. It's designing the entire store around those products. Everything has a purpose. Every shelf, every aisle, every box, every movement. There is very little room for unnecessary complexity. And this philosophy also affects inventory. A supermarket with thousands of products has to constantly predict what customers will buy. If it orders too much, products can sit on shelves. If it orders too little, customers may find empty spaces. Aldi reduces that problem by focusing on products that consistently sell. And then, it adds something else. Products that customers don't necessarily expect. Special items, seasonal products, limited time deals, furniture, kitchen equipment, clothing, garden supplies, even unusual household products. These items can suddenly appear and then disappear. This creates a completely different shopping psychology. Customers learn that if they see something interesting, they might need to buy it now, because next week, it might be gone. And that brings us to one of Aldi's most powerful ideas. Aldi doesn't need customers to visit only when they need milk. It wants customers to visit, just to see what's there. Because once you're inside, you might buy something you never planned to purchase. So Aldi's limited selection doesn't make the shopping experience weaker. In many ways, it makes it more efficient, more profitable, and even more exciting. But there's still one enormous question. If Aldi isn't filling its shelves with famous brands, how does it convince customers that these unfamiliar products are worth buying? The answer is one of the most important pieces of the entire Aldi machine. Private labels. Walk into a major supermarket, and you'll recognize the names immediately. Coca-Cola, Kellogg's, Pepsi, Nestle, and countless other brands you've seen for years. These brands spend enormous amounts of money on advertising, packaging, celebrity endorsements, television commercials, billboards, social media, and sponsorships. All of that marketing has a cost, and eventually, someone has to pay for it. Usually, the customer. Aldi took a completely different approach. Instead of filling its shelves with famous national brands, it built much of its business around something called private labels. These are products sold under Aldi-controlled brands, rather than the famous names customers already know. And this changes the economics of the supermarket. Think about what happens when a major brand sells a product. The manufacturer produces it. Then there are marketing expenses, brand management, advertising, packaging, distribution, and negotiations with retailers. The supermarket then needs its own margin. Every layer can add cost. Aldi tries to simplify that chain. Instead of paying primarily for someone else's famous brand, it can work directly with suppliers to develop products for its own labels. The result? A product can often be sold without carrying the same level of brand marketing expense associated with major national brands. But here's the really interesting part. Private labels aren't simply about making products cheaper. They're also about giving Aldi control. Control over the product, control over packaging, control over pricing, control over promotions, and most importantly, control over the relationship with the customer. If you buy a famous branded product, you may become loyal to that brand. You look for it wherever you shop. You may even be willing to pay more for it. But if Aldi creates its own product, the customer becomes loyal to Aldi. And that is extremely valuable, because Aldi isn't just selling groceries. It's building its own ecosystem of products. And some of these products are designed to imitate the experience of well-known brands, without carrying the same price. A customer might recognize the category immediately. The packaging may look familiar. The product may serve the same purpose, but the name is different, and the price can be dramatically lower. This creates an important psychological test. The customer looks at two products. One is a famous brand. The other is an unfamiliar Aldi label. And the question becomes, is the famous name really worth paying extra for? For millions of shoppers? The answer is no. And that's where Aldi gains power. Because once customers try a private label product and discover that they like it, they may come back for it again and again. Aldi has effectively turned an unknown product into a reason to return to the store. But private labels also create another advantage. Aldi doesn't have to give endless shelf space to competing brands. It can choose which products deserve a place. That means fewer products, fewer suppliers to manage, simpler shelves, and stronger purchasing power. It's all connected. The private label strategy supports the limited product strategy. The limited product strategy supports the smaller stores. The smaller stores reduce operating costs, and the lower costs help Aldi maintain its low-price reputation. One strategy feeds another, and another, until the entire business becomes a machine. But Aldi still needed a place to sell all of these products. And that's where another unusual decision comes in. Because if you walk into an Aldi store, you may notice something immediately. It doesn't look like a traditional supermarket. There are fewer decorations, less elaborate shelving, less visual clutter, and sometimes, products aren't even removed from their shipping boxes. At first, it looks cheap, but that's exactly the point. Because Aldi discovered that even the way a product sits on a shelf can save money. Imagine walking into two supermarkets. The first one feels almost like an entertainment experience. Bright displays, polished shelves, decorative signs, beautiful product arrangements, and thousands of products carefully positioned to catch your attention. Now walk into Aldi. The experience can feel completely different. The store is simple. The shelves are functional. The decorations are limited. And products are often displayed in the same boxes they arrived in. To some shoppers, it might look like Aldi is cutting corners. But that's not exactly what's happening. Aldi is cutting costs. And there's a huge difference. Because every traditional supermarket has to spend money making its stores look a certain way. Shelves need to be built. Products need to be unpacked. Displays need to be arranged. Promotional signs need to be created. And employees need to spend time making everything look perfect. Aldi asks a simple question. Does the customer really need all of that? If the answer is no, why pay for it? Take product displays. In a traditional supermarket, a worker may take a box from the stockroom, open it, remove every individual product, arrange those products neatly on a shelf, flatten the cardboard, and then take the empty packaging away. That's several steps. Aldi can sometimes reduce those steps dramatically. The products arrive in boxes designed to be placed directly onto the shelves. The box is opened, and the products are already there. It may not look as elegant, but it is much faster. And when you're operating thousands of stores, saving a few seconds on one product can become enormous savings across the entire business. This is one of Aldi's most important principles. Don't spend money improving something customers don't value enough to pay for. And Aldi applies that philosophy everywhere. The stores are generally smaller. That means less rent, less lighting, less heating and cooling, less maintenance, and fewer shelves to manage. The product selection is smaller. That means employees spend less time organizing endless variations of the same item. The displays are simpler. That means less labor. Even the signs inside the store are designed to be functional rather than luxurious. Aldi isn't trying to make shopping feel like a premium experience. It's trying to make shopping efficient. And that efficiency extends to something most shoppers don't think about. The distance products travel inside the store. In a traditional supermarket, a product might travel from a warehouse to a back room, then onto a cart, then onto a shelf, then be rearranged several times. Every movement takes time. Every movement costs money. Aldi's simpler layout can reduce some of that unnecessary handling. And this creates a fascinating business principle. Aldi doesn't necessarily save huge amounts of money with one massive decision. It saves a little, then a little more, then another little amount. One box doesn't need to be unpacked. One shelf doesn't need to be restocked as often. One store doesn't need to be as large. One employee can handle multiple responsibilities. One promotional display doesn't need to be built. One unnecessary step disappears. Then another, and another. Individually, these savings might look insignificant, but across thousands of stores, they become a competitive advantage worth millions. And there's another surprising part. Aldi's simple stores aren't only designed to save Aldi money. They can also change how customers behave. There are fewer distractions, fewer giant displays, fewer endless aisles, less time wandering around. Customers can get what they need and leave. That means Aldi can move a large number of shoppers through relatively small stores. But speed becomes especially important at one place: the checkout. Because Aldi's checkout process is unlike what many shoppers are used to. And behind that strange experience, there is a very deliberate business strategy. A supermarket can have the cheapest products in the world, but if it spends too much money running its stores, those savings disappear. And one of the biggest costs in retail is labor. Think about everything employees do inside a supermarket. They unload deliveries, move products, restock shelves, clean the store, manage inventory, answer customer questions, operate checkout lanes, handle cash, and deal with problems. In a traditional supermarket, these responsibilities can be divided among different employees. One person works at the checkout, another stocks shelves, another handles inventory, another works in the warehouse, another manages customer service. It makes the operation easier to organize, but it also creates more labor costs. Aldi took a different approach. Its stores are designed around employee efficiency. Instead of creating large teams for every individual task, Aldi expects employees to perform multiple responsibilities. A worker might be stocking shelves, then move to the checkout, then help unload products, then return to another task. The goal isn't simply to make employees work harder. It's to make sure their time is being used efficiently. Because in Aldi's business model, idle time is expensive. If an employee is standing around waiting for something to do, the company is still paying for that time. So Aldi tries to keep employees moving. And this philosophy begins before the store even opens. Products are organized to make stocking faster. Shelves are designed to be easy to replenish. Store layouts are relatively simple, and employees are trained to perform tasks quickly. This creates a kind of retail choreography. One employee can move from one job to another without needing a completely separate department for every responsibility. And the savings can become significant. Imagine a store that needs 5 additional employees, compared with another store. Now multiply that difference across hundreds, then thousands of locations. The numbers become enormous. But Aldi's labor strategy isn't just about having fewer employees. It's also about productivity. If one employee can accomplish more in an hour, the store can operate efficiently without needing as many people. And this is where Aldi's entire business model connects again. The company sells fewer products, so employees have fewer products to manage. The stores are smaller, so employees have less space to maintain. Products can arrive in shelf-ready packaging, so stocking takes less time. The checkout system is designed for speed, so employees can process more customers. Every decision supports another decision. But Aldi also understands something important. You can't demand high efficiency from employees without giving them the tools and training to achieve it. That's why Aldi has developed a reputation for intensive employee training and clearly defined procedures. The objective is simple. Employees need to know exactly what they're supposed to do, and they need to do it efficiently, because Aldi doesn't have much room for unnecessary complexity. And this brings us to one of the most famous parts of the Aldi experience: the checkout. If you've ever watched an Aldi cashier, you may notice something unusual. They scan products incredibly quickly, sometimes so quickly that first-time shoppers wonder, how are they doing that? The answer isn't simply that Aldi hires unusually fast cashiers. The entire system is designed around speed. The products, the barcodes, the checkout layout, the employee training, and even what happens after the items are scanned. Aldi doesn't want checkout to become a bottleneck, because a slow checkout can create lines. Lines can frustrate customers, and long checkout times can require more employees. So Aldi turned the checkout into another part of its cost-saving machine. And there's one more unusual Aldi trick, one that involves something sitting right outside the store: the shopping cart. There's a moment almost every first-time Aldi shopper remembers. You walk toward the entrance. You see a row of shopping carts. You reach for one, and then you notice something. The cart is locked. To release it, you need to insert a coin or deposit. At first, it might seem strange. Why would a supermarket make customers pay to use a shopping cart? But here's the clever part. You're not really paying for the cart. You're temporarily giving the store a reason to make sure you bring it back. When you return the cart, you get your deposit back. And that tiny system can solve a surprisingly expensive problem. In a traditional supermarket, employees may need to collect shopping carts from parking lots. They have to walk outside, gather carts, bring them back, and repeat the process throughout the day. It seems like a small task, but multiply it across thousands of stores, and the labor adds up. Aldi turns the customer into part of the system. If you want your deposit back, you have an incentive to return the cart yourself. One small behavioral trick can reduce unnecessary work. And this is classic Aldi. Instead of asking, how can we hire more people to solve this problem? Aldi asks, can we design the system so the problem happens less often? But the checkout is where this philosophy becomes even more obvious. Aldi cashiers are known for scanning groceries quickly. Very quickly, products move across the scanner, one after another, and the entire process can feel almost mechanical. That's not an accident. Speed is valuable. The faster a cashier processes customers, the more customers can move through the checkout, and the less time customers spend waiting. The fewer checkout lanes may need to remain open. But Aldi also uses another clever technique. After the cashier scans the products, the customer doesn't necessarily stand there waiting for every item to be carefully packed into bags. Instead, the groceries can be placed into the cart, and customers often move to the side to pack their own bags. Again, Aldi is removing a task. Instead of paying an employee to pack groceries, the customer does it. It might seem insignificant, but that's exactly how Aldi thinks. A few seconds here, a few cents there, a little less labor, a little less space, a little less handling. Then multiply those savings across millions of transactions. And suddenly, they aren't small anymore. There's another psychological effect too. The fast checkout creates momentum. Customers move quickly. Employees move quickly. The store feels efficient. And the customer learns something important. Aldi isn't trying to make shopping luxurious. It's trying to make shopping quick. Get in. Get what you need. Pay, pack, leave. And this connects perfectly with the rest of the Aldi model. The smaller stores reduce walking time. The limited selection reduces decision time. The shelf-ready boxes reduce stocking time. The efficient employees reduce labor time. And the fast checkout reduces transaction time. Aldi is essentially removing wasted time at every stage. But none of this would matter if Aldi still had to pay huge amounts to move its products around the country. And that's where another critical part of the business model comes in, the supply chain. Because the real battle over supermarket prices often begins long before a product reaches the shelf. It begins in the warehouse, at the factory, and on the road. When you look at a product sitting on an Aldi shelf, it seems simple. You pick it up, you put it in your cart, and you take it home. But before that product ever reaches the shelf, it may have traveled hundreds, or even thousands, of miles. From a manufacturer, to a distribution center, onto a truck, into a warehouse, and finally, into the store. Every step costs money. Fuel costs money. Warehouses cost money. Workers cost money. Transportation costs money. And every time a product is handled, there's another opportunity for costs to increase. For a supermarket that wants to compete on price, the supply chain becomes critical. And this is where Aldi's philosophy becomes extremely powerful. The company doesn't simply ask, how can we sell this product cheaply? It asks, how can we move this product as cheaply as possible? Because a cheap product is useless if the cost of getting it to the customer is too high. Aldi's relatively limited product range gives it an advantage here. Remember, Aldi doesn't need to move thousands of different brands through every store. It can concentrate its logistics around a smaller selection of products. That creates greater efficiency. Imagine a truck carrying one product in huge quantities, compared with a truck carrying dozens of different products, each going to different locations, with different delivery schedules. The second system is more complicated, and complexity costs money. Aldi tries to eliminate that complexity. Its distribution network is designed around efficiency, consistency, and high-volume movement. Products move through the system, and the company tries to minimize unnecessary handling. That matters because every time a box is moved, someone has to move it. Every time it is stored, someone has to manage it. Every extra day it sits in a warehouse, it occupies space, and every extra step creates another cost. So Aldi's goal is simple. Keep products moving. Factory, distribution center, store, customer. The fewer unnecessary steps, the better. And the strategy becomes even more powerful when combined with Aldi's private label business. Because Aldi controls much of what it sells, it can work closely with suppliers. It doesn't have to treat every product like a completely independent brand relationship. Instead, it can negotiate around volume, packaging, specifications, delivery, and price. This creates something that retailers value enormously: purchasing power. If Aldi knows it can sell millions of units, it has a strong reason to negotiate aggressively, and suppliers have a reason to cooperate, because getting a large order from a major retailer can be extremely valuable. This creates a relationship where both sides benefit from efficiency. The supplier wants predictable volume, Aldi wants predictable prices, and the customer wants a lower price. But there is another piece of the puzzle. Aldi's stores are relatively simple. That means deliveries don't have to be designed around endless shelf arrangements. Products can arrive, be moved into the store, and be placed where customers can buy them. Again, fewer steps, less labor, less time, lower costs. And when you combine this with everything we've already seen, the picture becomes much clearer. Aldi isn't saving money in one place. It's saving money across the entire journey, from supplier to factory, to warehouse, to truck, to store, to checkout. Every stage has been designed to remove waste. And that's the real secret behind Aldi's low prices. Not one revolutionary invention, but thousands of small efficiencies working together. However, there is still a question. If Aldi works so hard to reduce costs, does it actually pass all of those savings to customers? Or is there another reason Aldi can afford to keep prices low? Because behind the cheap products, there is another part of the business model: profit. And understanding Aldi's profits reveals just how powerful this system really is. At this point, Aldi's strategy starts to look almost too simple. Smaller stores, fewer products, private labels, fewer employees, faster checkouts, simpler displays, efficient logistics. But here's where all of those decisions become truly powerful. Because Aldi isn't just trying to save money. It's trying to turn small savings into a massive competitive advantage. Think about a single Aldi store. Imagine saving a few dollars here, a little labor there, a little less transportation cost, a little less electricity, a little less packaging, and a little less inventory waste. Individually, none of these savings seem revolutionary. But now multiply them. Hundreds of stores, then thousands, millions of customers, millions of transactions. Suddenly, those tiny savings become enormous. And Aldi can use that advantage in one of the most powerful ways possible: price. When Aldi's operating costs are lower, it has more room to sell products at lower prices. And lower prices create something incredibly valuable: customer traffic. People notice when their grocery bill is smaller. A shopper might visit Aldi because they want to save money on a few products. But once they're inside, they don't necessarily buy only those products. They may purchase bread, milk, snacks, coffee, cleaning supplies, frozen food, and something they didn't even plan to buy. The low price gets the customer through the door. The store's product selection creates the rest of the basket. This creates a powerful cycle. Lower costs lead to lower prices. Lower prices attract more customers. More customers create higher sales volume. And higher volume can strengthen Aldi's ability to negotiate with suppliers, which can help lower costs even further. Then the cycle starts again. It's a business model built around efficiency feeding efficiency. But Aldi doesn't need to make every product dramatically cheaper. It needs to create the perception of overall value. If customers believe their weekly shopping trip costs less, they begin to trust the store. And once trust develops, Aldi becomes a habit. That's extremely important. Because grocery shopping is repetitive, people don't buy groceries once a year. They buy them every week, sometimes several times a week. So if Aldi can become the place where customers think, I can get good products without spending as much, it can build long-term loyalty. And this is where private labels become even more important. Aldi doesn't need to spend enormous amounts of money convincing customers that a famous brand is worth buying. It can focus on creating products that customers themselves decide are good enough. If shoppers try an Aldi product, like it, and come back for it, Aldi has created something much more valuable than a one-time sale. It has created a repeat purchase. And repeat purchases are the foundation of a powerful retail business. But there is another fascinating part of Aldi's strategy. The company doesn't always try to be the absolute cheapest on every single item. Instead, it focuses on creating a store-wide impression of value. And that distinction matters. Because customers don't usually calculate the exact cost of every product in their cart. They remember how the shopping trip felt. They remember the total. And they remember whether they felt like they got a good deal. Aldi understands that psychology, and it uses the entire shopping experience to reinforce one message. You are saving money here. But then Aldi does something even more interesting. It occasionally introduces products that have nothing to do with basic groceries. Seasonal items, kitchen products, home goods, clothing, garden equipment, unexpected deals. These products create curiosity, and curiosity creates visits. So Aldi isn't simply a supermarket. It's part grocery store, part discount retailer, and part treasure hunt, And that leads to one of the most fascinating parts of the business, the psychology behind the Aldi shopping experience. Because Aldi doesn't just design its stores to save money. It designs them to influence what customers buy. Aldi's biggest secret might not be the products. It might not be the warehouses. And it might not even be the low prices. It might be psychology. Because Aldi doesn't simply create a cheap store. It creates an environment where customers feel like they're getting a deal. And that feeling can be incredibly powerful. Think about a traditional supermarket. You walk through carefully designed aisles. Bright signs tell you about promotions. Large displays highlight special offers. Products are arranged to encourage browsing. Everything is designed to make you stop, look, compare, and buy. Aldi uses a different approach. The store is simpler. The number of products is limited, and there are fewer distractions. But that simplicity creates something interesting. Clarity. When you see fewer products, your decision becomes easier. You don't have to compare 20 different versions of the same item. You see a few options. You choose one, and you move on. This reduces what psychologists sometimes call decision fatigue. The more choices people have, the more mental energy they spend deciding. Aldi removes much of that choice. But then, it adds something else. Scarcity. Remember those unusual products we talked about earlier? The seasonal items, the household products, the limited time deals. They aren't always there. And when customers know something might disappear, its perceived value can increase. Suddenly, you don't think, maybe I'll buy this next week. You think, if I don't buy it now, it might be gone. That's a powerful psychological trigger. And Aldi's shopping environment encourages it. You enter the store for milk. You find the milk. And then you notice something unexpected. A kitchen gadget. A piece of clothing. A seasonal decoration. Something you never planned to buy. You hesitate. You look at the price. It seems reasonable. And then your brain makes a quick calculation. I might not see this again. So you put it in the cart. This is sometimes referred to as the treasure hunt effect. You aren't just shopping for groceries. You're searching for unexpected deals. And that can make customers want to visit Aldi more often. But Aldi's psychology doesn't stop there. There's another powerful effect. Price anchoring. When customers repeatedly see Aldi offering low prices, those prices become a reference point. A product that costs slightly more somewhere else can suddenly feel expensive. Aldi doesn't need to convince you that every competitor is overpriced. It simply needs to establish its own price as the benchmark. And once that benchmark exists, customers begin comparing everything against it. But perhaps the most important psychological trick is even simpler. Aldi makes customers feel like they're smart shoppers. When someone tells a friend, I got this for much less at Aldi, they aren't just talking about groceries. They're talking about making a clever financial decision. The customer feels like they discovered something, like they found a secret. And that feeling creates loyalty. Because people don't only return to places that save them money. They return to places that make them feel good about how they spent their money. And Aldi has built its entire identity around that feeling. Smart, simple, affordable. But there is a potential downside. If Aldi's entire reputation is built around low prices, what happens when another supermarket becomes cheaper? What happens when customers discover that some products aren't actually cheaper? And what happens when shoppers start demanding more? More brands, more convenience, more online shopping, more delivery, more premium products. That brings us to the question Aldi cannot escape. Is Aldi really cheaper? Or is its greatest advantage the perception that it is? For years, Aldi has built its reputation around one powerful promise: low prices. But there's an important question every shopper eventually asks. Is Aldi actually cheaper? The answer is more complicated than it seems. Because grocery prices are constantly changing. A product can be cheaper at Aldi today, and cheaper somewhere else tomorrow. Different supermarkets run different promotions. Prices vary by location, and some products simply aren't comparable. So Aldi's real advantage isn't necessarily that every single item is always the cheapest. Its advantage is the overall system. Aldi is designed to keep its operating costs low, and that gives it the ability to maintain competitive prices across a large portion of the shopping basket. But there's another reason the comparison can be difficult. Private labels. When you compare an Aldi product with a famous brand, you're not always comparing identical products. One might be a national brand. The other might be Aldi's private label. They may use different ingredients, different packaging, different manufacturing processes, or different suppliers. So the question isn't always, which product is cheaper? Sometimes the better question is the more expensive brand actually worth the difference? And that's where Aldi's strategy becomes powerful, because it challenges the assumption that a famous brand automatically means better value. For some shoppers, the answer is obvious. They prefer their favorite brands. They care about taste. They care about consistency. They care about specific ingredients. And they are willing to pay more. But for other shoppers, the difference isn't worth it. If a private label product performs well enough, why pay extra for the name? That is the question Aldi has built its business around. And there is another factor: impulse spending. Traditional supermarkets often have enormous selections. More products mean more opportunities to buy things you didn't plan to purchase. Aldi has fewer products, but its unusual seasonal items create a different type of impulse buying. You may enter looking for groceries and leave with a kitchen appliance, a piece of clothing, or some random household item you never expected to find. So Aldi isn't immune to impulse spending. It simply uses a different version of it. And this reveals something important about the Aldi model. The company isn't trying to make shopping feel luxurious. It isn't trying to make customers spend hours inside the store. Instead, it tries to make customers feel that they are getting value. And that perception can be more important than the exact price of every individual product. But Aldi's low-cost model also comes with trade-offs. You may not find your favorite brand. You may have fewer choices. You may need to bag your own groceries. You may need to return your cart. And the shopping experience may feel less polished than at a premium supermarket. For some people, those aren't disadvantages. They're the reason Aldi works. Customers are effectively saying, "I'll give up some convenience and choice if you give me a lower bill." And that trade-off is the foundation of Aldi's success. But the world of grocery retail is changing. Online shopping is growing. Home delivery is becoming more common. Customers increasingly expect convenience. And competitors are learning from Aldi's strategies. So the final question isn't just whether Aldi can stay cheap. It's whether Aldi can stay cheap while the supermarket industry around it changes. Because the next phase of Aldi's story, maybe its most difficult one yet, Aldi's story isn't really a story about cheap groceries. It's a story about something much bigger: efficiency. For decades, the supermarket industry followed a familiar formula: build bigger stores, offer more products, create more choices, spend more money on advertising, make shopping more convenient. Aldi looked at that formula and asked a completely different question. What if customers don't actually need all of it? What if a supermarket could become more successful by doing less? Fewer products, smaller stores, simpler shelves, private labels, faster employees, faster checkouts, efficient logistics, and almost no unnecessary spending. Aldi turned those ideas into a system, and that system became its competitive advantage. But the most impressive part is that Aldi didn't rely on one revolutionary invention. There was no secret technology, no giant advertising campaign, no single product that changed everything. Instead, Aldi found hundreds of small ways to remove waste. A few seconds saved at the checkout, a few minutes saved when stocking shelves, a little less space required in the store, a little less inventory sitting in the warehouse, a little less money spent on advertising, a little less labor spent on unnecessary tasks. Each saving looked insignificant, but Aldi understood something powerful. Small advantages become enormous when repeated at scale. And that's a lesson that goes far beyond supermarkets. Because the same principle can apply to almost any business. A company doesn't always need to create something completely new. Sometimes, it simply needs to remove what isn't necessary. That is what makes Aldi so fascinating. It didn't ask, "How can we give customers more?" It asked, "What can we remove without making customers leave?" And that question changed everything. Aldi removed expensive brands, but replaced them with private labels. It removed huge product selections, but kept the products customers actually wanted. It removed elaborate store displays, but kept functional shelves. It removed some checkout services and gained speed. It removed unnecessary labor and built a more efficient workforce. And instead of hiding these compromises, Aldi turned them into part of its identity. The customer knows the store is simple. They know they may have to return the cart. They know they may have to pack their own groceries. They know they won't find every brand. And yet, they keep coming back because they understand the deal. You give up a little convenience, and Aldi gives you value in return. That's the genius of the model. Aldi isn't trying to convince everyone that its way is better. It's offering a trade. Less, for less, and for millions of shoppers. That's a trade they're happy to make. But Aldi's greatest lesson may be even simpler. In business, you don't always win by doing more. Sometimes, you win by doing less, better. Because when every unnecessary cost is removed, the business becomes faster. When the business becomes faster, it becomes more efficient. And when efficiency is repeated at massive scale, it becomes a competitive advantage that is incredibly difficult to copy. That is why Aldi can walk into an industry dominated by enormous supermarkets and still compete. Not because it has the biggest stores, not because it has the most products, and not because it spends the most money, but because it built a machine where almost every part has one purpose: keep the cost low and pass enough of that efficiency back to the customer to make them come back again. So the next time you walk into Aldi, don't just look at the price tag. Look at everything behind it. The small store, the limited selection, the private label product, the cardboard box, the fast cashier, the shopping cart, the supply chain, the entire system. Because that low price isn't really a price. It's the final result of thousands of decisions. And that's the real reason why Aldi is so cheap. This is Business Decoded. Behind every billion-dollar brand is a story. 2-second pause. If you enjoyed uncovering the business strategy behind why Aldi is so cheap and want to discover the hidden stories behind the world's biggest brands, make sure to subscribe to Business Decoded. Every week, we break down the companies, the strategies, and the decisions that shaped the modern world. Because behind every billion-dollar brand, there's a story worth decoding. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next documentary.